rolled off the Atlantic in long, moaning currents that wrapped themselves around the low dunes of Ocracoke Island. It was the kind of wind that old sailors feared and young sailors misjudged, a wind that carried messages from distant storms, or perhaps ghosts, depending on whom you asked. The Outer Banks had a way of making the line between the living and the dead feel thin, as if the place itself was an old memory trying to speak. In the autumn of 1718, the nights grew longer, the tides angrier, and the people more restless. Islanders whispered about strange glows drifting across the water at night, blue flames dancing above the marshes, lantern lights moving where no lantern should be, and dark shapes stalking the edges of the inlet. The villagers were sure of their cause. Edward Teach, Blackbeard, was nearby again. The Ocracoke Lighthouse of this era was not yet the tall white tower we know today. That would come later, in 1823. But a rudimentary structure stood, half watchtower, half navigation post, a squat wooden beacon built by desperate necessity. Mariners needed a reference point in the treacherous inlet, and islanders needed a vantage point to watch for storms, and pirates, and none were feared or revered more than Blackbeard. The beacon keeper, Elias Culpepper, stood on the wooden gallery that night, holding a lantern against the wind. Elias was a young man, sharp-eyed and uncomfortably aware of his own importance. It fell on him to light the tower's crude oil lamp at dusk, and he never failed. But tonight, he sensed something different, something charged, like the air before lightning strikes. Out past the breakers, in the moon's weak shimmer, he saw it, a ship's silhouette, dark, low, purposeful, sliding into the inlet. He raised the lantern, squinting. The vessel's proportions were unmistakable. He whispered a name carried by countless fearful lips, Queen Anne's Revenge. But he knew that was impossible. The real Queen Anne's Revenge had wrecked months earlier on Beaufort Inlet. Still, that silhouette, that stance in the water, it radiated danger. And the ship that replaced the Revenge was no less fearsome. The Adventure, Blackbeard's last command. Elias swallowed hard. Blackbeard had returned to Ocracoke, and the island, small, isolated, vulnerable, felt suddenly far too quiet. Blackbeard loved Ocracoke for reasons few understood. To him, it was more than a hiding place. It was a sanctuary. The inlets were narrow, crooked, shallow, and deadly to large naval vessels. Blackbeard knew them like a second spine. He could navigate them blindfolded, while a pursuing warship would keel over on a hidden bar within minutes. When the Adventure anchored in the protected cove near Springer's Point, the island seemed to exhale. Though whether in relief or dread was unclear, Blackbeard stood on deck with his usual swagger, though his men sensed a heaviness in him. He wore no lit fuses in his beard tonight, no roaring display of terror. He looked older than the legend suggested, broad shoulders sloping, face lined by sun and salt, eyes steady but remote. Only his beard remained mythical, thick, black, braided with ribbons and bits of gold. Behind him, the last fire-orange glimmer of day sank below the horizon. "Drop anchor," he ordered. The chain rattled down. The ship settled. "Shall we prepare for guests?" Israel Hands asked, stepping beside him. Blackbeard smirked. "Aye, word travels. We'll have company soon enough." His voice lowered, but not all of it welcome. He had recently accepted a royal pardon, though no one believed he intended to stay clean. Virginia Governor Alexander Spotswood certainly didn't. The governor was determined to end piracy on the colonial coast, and Blackbeard, charismatic, cunning, and maddeningly elusive, was the greatest prize of all. Rumours spread that Spotswood had dispatched naval officers without proper authority to capture or kill him. Rumours Blackbeard fully believed. Still, he returned, not because he underestimated the danger, but because he was tired of running. He gazed toward the dim shape of the early lighthouse tower on the shoreline. It glowed faintly, steady, comforting, trustworthy. "It's strange," he murmured, almost to himself. "What is?" Hans asked. "How a simple lantern atop a wooden hut can outshine a man's reputation." He paused. "When I am gone, that little flame will keep burning, maybe longer than any story they tell of me." Israel blinked. He had never heard the captain speak this way. "You're not planning on dying, are you?" Blackbeard laughed, deep and rumbling. "No, Israel. I'm planning on living. But one should know when the circle begins to close." 20 miles north, 2 royal vessels, the HMS Jane and HMS Ranger, cut swiftly through the night waters. Their commanders, Lieutenant Robert Maynard and Lieutenant Samuel Hyde, had sworn privately to bring back Blackbeard's head, no matter the cost. Maynard was young, too young, according to many naval officers, to lead such a mission. But he possessed a fierce determination that Spotswood admired. He also possessed a quiet anger. Blackbeard had plundered ships flying the British flag, humiliated their crews, and laughed in the face of order. As the wind strengthened, Maynard studied a small hand-drawn chart under the lantern. "Ocracoke Inlet," he murmured. "Narrow, shallow, cursed," his helmsman snorted. "Perfect place for a demon." Maynard didn't smile. He had read every report, every survivor's account. He'd studied Blackbeard the way hunters study a wolf that refuses to be trapped. The pirate's brutality was matched only by his intelligence. He paid islanders well, charmed governors, frightened sailors, and outmaneuvered fleets. Killing him would require more than courage. It would require luck. And luck on the banks was a fickle thing. Hyde's ship cut across the moonlit water behind him. Maynard raised a glass and saw Hyde wave acknowledgement. Both crews were tense, silent, strapped with muskets and cutlasses. They knew what sort of man they were sailing to meet. One sailor muttered, "Ain't no man. He's the devil's own." Another elbowed him. "Devil or man, he bleeds." Maynard closed his chart. "So does everyone," he said quietly. "And by tomorrow's sunrise, the bastard will bleed for England." The crew stiffened, their tension sharpening. But deep inside, Maynard wasn't certain. Everything about Ocracoke felt haunted, an island that listened, waited, and remembered. He could almost hear the waves whispering the pirate's name. Teach, teach, teach. Back on Ocracoke, Blackbeard hosted one of the wildest gatherings the inlet had ever seen. The night before a battle, even if he didn't yet know the time or shape of it, deserved rum, music, and laughter. Pirates from neighbouring anchorages arrived by the dozens. They brought fiddles, drums, and crates of spirits. Fires were lit along the shoreline. The shadows of swaying bodies flickered against the dunes like restless spirits conjured for a farewell performance. Blackbeard sat on an overturned barrel near the centre of it all. His men shoved mugs into his hands faster than he could empty them. He reclined, boots stretched out, enjoying the rare sense of ease Israel Hands played a rough tune on the fiddle. Edward Salter roasted fresh fish on a spit. A group of younger pirates sang ballads about storms and tavern girls and lost fortunes. Blackbeard's deep laugh rolled through the camp. The man was intimidating, yes, but tonight his eyes softened at the edges. Tonight, he was not the demon of legend. He was a man among his brethren. Yet around the edges of celebration lurked unease. Some men had spotted distant sails earlier in the day. Others claimed they saw lantern signals exchanged between islanders and unknown parties. Blackbeard waved these off, but he heard every word. When the music quieted, Blackbeard rose and addressed the men. "Brothers!" His voice boomed over the crackling fires. If tomorrow brings blood, then let tonight bring memory. They roared in approval. He raised his mug toward the faint silhouette of the watchtower lighthouse on the shoreline, its lanterns still flickering. That light has watched over me many times, he said softly. If it sees fit, it will watch over me again. Elias Culpepper, the young keeper, watched secretly from the dunes. He had not intended to spy, but curiosity tugged stronger than fear. Seeing the infamous pirate up close was surreal. Blackbeard looked less monstrous and more human-weathered, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But not the horned spectre painted in sailors' tales. In that moment, Elias felt something strange, something like pity. He whispered to the sea breeze, "You're not long for this world, are you?" The breeze carried his words away. The morning rose cold and merciless. Mist clung low over the inlet, drifting like ghosts still unsure of their resting place. The sun was only a faint smear behind the fog when Maynard's ships approached the anchorage. Elias Culpepper was already at the tower, oil lamp extinguished, watching the horizon. His breath caught when he saw the shapes of two sloops creeping toward the inlet, oars muffled, sails trimmed. He knew instantly, these were no merchants, these were hunters, and Blackbeard was the prey. Down at the pirate camp, the crackling fires of the night before had burned down to coals. A few men snored drunkenly, others prepared breakfast. Blackbeard, surprisingly sober for the revelry he'd indulged in, stood near the water, staring out at the quiet cove. He sensed something. "Israel," he called. Hands hurried over. "Aye, Captain? Wake the men, now!" Israel didn't question it. Moments later, a lookout's shout pierced the morning haze. "Sails! 2 ships coming in!" The camp exploded into chaos. Men scrambled for weapons, kicked sleeping crewmates awake, overturned crates searching for powder, and shot Blackbeard, however, remained calm. He strapped pistols across his chest, 3 on each shoulder, 2 more at his belt. A long, slow-burning fuse smouldered in his beard, curling smoke around his face. "You said last night you wasn't dying today," Israel muttered, trembling as he loaded his musket. Blackbeard grinned. "I ain't planning to, but it'll take more than 2 little navy boats to change my mind." The Adventure's deck filled with armed pirates. The air crackled with tension, and through the thinning fog, they saw HMS Jane and HMS Ranger closing in. Blackbeard's eyes narrowed. "So, Spotswood sends pups to do a man's work." He drew a cutlass, the blade glinting like a new moon. "Let's show them how wolves fight." The first cannon shot cracked the morning open like a thunderclap. A plume of smoke erupted from the HMS Ranger, drifting across the inlet in long grey tendrils. The ball splashed into the shallow water just shy of the Adventure, sending a geyser up over the bow. Blackbeard didn't flinch. His men scattered to their stations, shouting, priming pistols, pushing powder into the swivel guns. Smoke from Blackbeard's beard fuse curled up around his jawline, making him look like a figure rising from the underworld. "Run out the bow gun," he ordered. A small 3-pounder rolled forward and belched flame. The ball struck the Jane's railing, bursting into splinters. Maynard ducked instinctively, then shouted for return fire, but as the naval crews tried to maneuver closer, disaster struck. The Jane shuddered violently as her keel scraped Ocracoke's infamous sandbars. Hidden, shifting, treacherous shoals that had claimed more ships than any pirate ever had. The vessel lurched sideways, nearly grounding. Maynard cursed. He'd studied the charts. He'd memorized the depths. And still, he'd misjudged. The inlet seemed to laugh at him. "Trim to starboard," he barked. "Get her free." But the delay was exactly what Blackbeard expected. He turned to his crew. "See, lads! Even the sea herself hates kings." The pirates roared. He raised his arm. "Boarding crews! Ready!" The Adventure surged forward, sails trimmed perfectly to the morning breeze. She slid across the shallow inlet like she was part of it, like she didn't float on the water, but with it. Maynard watched in frustration as the pirate sloop cut a clean arc around the sandbar, drawing close. He steadied himself. "Prepare to fire muskets!" The air filled with shouting. Then came the first crack of musket fire. A ball whistled past Blackbeard's ear. Another grazed the wooden rail by his hand. Pirates fired back, adding their own thunder to the rising storm. Swivel guns erupted. Splinters, smoke, and blood splashed across the decks of both vessels. On the lighthouse shore, Elias Culpepper watched this chaos unfold with wide, horrified eyes. He'd never seen a naval battle before. It was nothing like the tales. No strategy, no elegance. It was raw, brutal, and fast, like a storm given human form. He clutched the railing as if it might keep him from being blown away. Down at Springer's Point, townsfolk gathered, drawn by the sounds of war. Some cheered quietly for the Navy, others prayed, and a few, though they'd never admit it aloud, found their hearts unexpectedly rooting for the Pirate King. Blackbeard, for his part, seemed to devour the chaos. He strode the deck like a giant, pistols gleaming against his bandolier, eyes fixed on the Jane with cold amusement. A ball struck the mast just above him, showering him in wood chips. He didn't blink. He raised his cutlass toward Maynard's ship. "Close the distance!" he roared. The Adventure surged forward again. Maynard saw the danger immediately. Blackbeard intended to board. If he succeeded, naval discipline and British steel might not be enough. The pirate's crew was savage, fearless, and drunk off the promise of glory. Maynard had to be smarter. "Lower the colours," he ordered. His lieutenant stared at him. "But sir—" "Do it." The Union Jack fell. Every pirate on the Adventure cheered. "They yield!" Israel Hands cried. "They give up!" But Blackbeard frowned, hard. "No," he muttered. "Maynard is not a man who bends. He hides something." Israel blinked. "What, Captain?" Blackbeard narrowed his eyes. "A trap." Maynard's disguise was simple but brilliant. He had ordered most of his crew below deck, hiding them from sight. His plan was to lure Blackbeard close, trick him into boarding, and overwhelm him with sheer numbers. Only a handful of sailors remained on the Jane's deck, feigning fear and surrender. Blackbeard steered the Adventure closer. Israel Hands grinned. "We'll take her clean! Barely any men left!" But Blackbeard's instincts clawed at his mind. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He sniffed the air. Powder, sweat, many men, more than visible. His eyes scanned the deck. Too clean, too still. He shook his head. He's hiding men below. Hands swallowed. "You're certain?" Blackbeard's voice dropped to a growl. "I've lived by trusting my instincts. They've never failed me yet." The Adventure drifted alongside the Jane. Grappling hooks flew, ropes tightened, the ships locked together. The two captains stared across the narrow gap, neither blinking. Maynard broke the silence. "Edward Teach," he called, voice steady. "You are hereby ordered to surrender in the name of His Majesty the King." Blackbeard laughed, a thunderous rolling sound. "I am not in the habit of surrendering, lad." He stepped onto the rail. Maynard stepped forward too, resting his boot on his own. The world seemed to narrow until only the two men existed. The Pirate King, the Navy's hound. One born from chaos, one sworn to restore order. The inlet held its breath. Then Blackbeard leapt, and all hell broke loose. The moment Blackbeard landed on the Jane's deck, Maynard's trap sprang open. Dozens of hidden sailors burst from below with muskets primed, bayonets fixed, and eyes burning with fury. Blackbeard wheeled, shocked, but only for an instant. "Shoot him!" Maynard roared. Muskets thundered. Smoke engulfed the deck. Blackbeard staggered. 1, 2, 3 musket balls slamming into him. Another tore across his ribs. A fifth grazed his arm. But he didn't fall. He turned, bleeding, enraged, and fired both pistols, point blank, into the nearest sailors. Both men dropped instantly. Another rushed him with a bayonet. Blackbeard caught the blade with his free hand, ripped it away, and headbutted the man so hard the sailor collapsed unconscious. Maynard watched in stunned awe. He'd expected a fight, but this was something else entirely. This was a force of nature. Blackbeard drew another pistol, fired, drew another, fired, drew another, fired. His bandolier emptied in seconds. The deck of the Jane became a slaughterhouse of smoke and blood and splintered wood. His cutlass flashed in wide arcs, sparks flying as it clashed against bayonets and pikes. But the navy kept coming. Maynard waded through the chaos toward him. Blackbeard's eyes locked onto his. Their duel pulled them into a whirlwind of clashing steel. Maynard struck first, slicing a shallow cut across Blackbeard's thigh. Blackbeard countered with terrifying strength, his blade crashing down like a hammer. Maynard barely blocked it. Each strike shook his arm to the bone. The pirate's size, fury, and pain tolerance were beyond anything Maynard had imagined. Blood poured from several wounds, and yet he fought with increasing ferocity, as if each injury only fed his fire. "You fight well, lad," Blackbeard bellowed, sparks flying as their blades locked. "But you fight like a man who fears death." Maynard gritted his teeth. "And you fight like a man who should." He broke the lock, lunged. Blackbeard twisted aside, slashing Maynard's forearm. Blood sprayed across the deck. Maynard stumbled. Blackbeard drew a pistol from his belt, his last loaded one, and pointed it straight at Maynard's chest. "This ends now." He pulled the trigger. A click. A dead spark. No fire. Maynard didn't hesitate. He rammed his sword forward. The blade sank deep into Blackbeard's stomach. The pirate froze. Then he smiled and grabbed Maynard by the throat with a grip like iron. "You'll need more than that," he whispered. Maynard's lungs burned, his vision blurred. He could feel Blackbeard tightening his fingers, crushing his windpipe. He dropped his sword, reached instinctively for something, anything, and found a pistol on the deck. He pressed it between them and fired. The shot tore through Blackbeard's side. The Pirate King's grip loosened. Maynard collapsed to his knees, gasping. Around them, the battle raged, but the duel had taken center stage. Both crews watched with paralyzed fascination as the two men fought like titans. Blackbeard staggered, blood pouring down his coat. But he didn't fall. Not yet. He raised his cutlass again, roaring. Maynard scrambled backward, grabbing another weapon, the broken hilt of a boarding pike. Blackbeard charged. Maynard thrust. The splintered shaft drove into Blackbeard's throat. The Pirate King stopped, eyes wide, chest heaving. He reached up and pulled the weapon out. Blood cascaded down his chest. He opened his mouth, perhaps to curse, perhaps to laugh, but no sound came. He stepped forward, then another, and finally, he fell. The deck shuddered under the weight of him, as if the island itself felt the moment. The last roar of Edward Teach, Blackbeard, died in his throat. Elias Culpepper stood frozen atop the lighthouse platform. From his position, the battle had been a distant but visible nightmare. Flashes of gunfire, silhouettes clashing, bodies collapsing. But he had seen the moment Blackbeard fell. It struck him harder than he expected. He didn't cheer, didn't smile. He felt hollow. This man, feared across oceans, whispered about in taverns, painted in nightmares, was dead. And the world felt somehow smaller. The inlets seemed to grow quieter, the waves gentler. Even the gulls circled silently, as if unsure whether they should cry out. Elias whispered. "May God receive you. Whatever you became, you were still a man." Down below, the Navy officers secured the Adventure. Survivors were captured. Wounded pirates were hauled ashore. The dead, there were many. But Blackbeard's body, that one still commanded awe. Even in death, he looked enormous, his beard soaked in blood, his wounds, more than 20, oozing in the sunlight. Maynard limped toward him, shaken, exhausted, barely standing. He stared at the fallen man. "Cut his head," he said quietly. His crew hesitated. "Sir?" Hyde asked. "It must be done. For Spotswood, for the colonies, for the crown." And so they obeyed. The sound of the cutlass severing the neck echoed faintly across the water. Elias flinched. The head, heavy, braided, terrifying even in death, was hung from the Jane's bowsprit for the journey back. As the Navy prepared to depart, Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. The lighthouse shadow stretched long over the water. For the rest of his life, he would swear he saw something strange that morning. A shadow rising from the deck of the Jane, dark and immense, drifting towards Springer's Point before dissolving into mist. Whether it was imagination or something more, he never knew, but the locals would whisper for generations. Ocracoke Island did not bury Blackbeard, it kept him. The storm crested over Ocracoke Inlet like a living thing, a heaving beast of black water and gnashing wind. It clawed at the masts of every vessel still moored near the island, but none fought harder than Lieutenant Maynard's battered sloop. His men clung to the rigging like barnacles, soaked through, their faces pale with a fear none dared name aloud. Maynard stared into the dark, searching for the one thing the storm could never hide. The phantom lantern that everyone swore had started all of this. And then, there it was. A cold green flame flickered across the water, drifting above the waves without sway or rhythm. It pulsed once, twice, like a heartbeat. Blackbeard's heartbeat. "Steady!" Maynard shouted, though his voice trembled. "Follow that light!" The sailors obeyed, but all of them murmured silent prayers. As the sloop struggled forward, the inlet opened like a vast swallowing mouth. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating for a heartbeat a figure standing on a sandbar. Tall, broad-shouldered, wild-haired. Blackbeard, rain hammered down. The apparition raised a hand, and the spectral lantern brightened, its glow turning the stormy night a sickly green. Maynard felt the air tighten in his lungs. "Why do you still haunt us?" he whispered. Blackbeard's voice rode the wind, deep and hollow. "Because my death was not an end, it was a spark." The sea roared. The lantern flared so violently that Maynard staggered back, shielding his eyes. When the light faded, the phantom of Blackbeard vanished, but the lantern remained, floating, waiting. As the men lowered a skiff to retrieve it, none noticed the dark figure watching from the dunes, eyes burning faintly, hungrily. The skiff scraped the sand with a harsh wooden groan. 2 men stepped out, boots sinking into the wet shore as they approached the floating lantern. It hovered inches above the ground, its flame steady despite the storm raging overhead. "Grab it," one whispered. The moment his hand closed around the handle, the world changed. A thunderous crack split the air. All wind stopped. All rain froze mid-fall. Even the waves became suspended glass. In this impossible stillness, a shape materialized behind the men. Massive, smoking, eyes glowing red. Blackbeard's spirit towered over them. Spectral ropes hanging from his limbs like the tendrils of some drowned god. "You dare take what is mine," the ghost snarled. The sailors screamed. Their voices did not echo, They shattered the silence like stones thrown through ice. The lantern flared, tearing itself from the sailor's grasp and streaking toward the spirit like a loyal hound. Blackbeard's hand closed around it. The storm resumed. The sea detonated with thunder. The two sailors were hurled backward, slamming into the sand as Maynard and the others rushed down from the dunes. Blackbeard raised the lantern high. Green fire coiled around him, swirling faster until it engulfed his entire form. The ghost's body twisted, merging with the flame, an inferno shaped like a man. "I claimed these waters," the blazing apparition roared. "I claimed them in life. I claim them still." The ghost surged toward Maynard, but before it reached him, the flame flickered, dimmed, collapsed inward, as if sucked toward some unseen void. And then it was gone. The lantern dropped into the surf, hissing as the green flame vanished. Nothing remained of Blackbeard, but the smell of smoke and the echo of distant, mocking laughter carried on the wind. Maynard picked up the lantern, now dark and cold. "We end this," he whispered. But the sea was not done with him. Far offshore, waves rose in unnatural shapes, three great forms like the silhouettes of ships. Ghost ships, a phantom fleet answering their king's call. Long after Maynard retired from the Royal Navy, long after his hair silvered and his bones ached with the weight of age, he returned to Ocracoke Inlet one final time. The sea was calm that evening. The sun cast a warm orange glow over the dunes, and gulls circled lazily overhead. But he felt no peace, only the familiar pressure in his chest, the sense of being watched. He sat on the sand with the lantern beside him. He had kept it hidden for decades, hoping its silence meant the haunting had ended. It had not. As twilight deepened, the lantern began to glow faintly, as if stirred by memory. Maynard stared at it, unafraid now. "You beat me once," he said quietly. "I know you'll try again." The flame inside shimmered, soft, almost gentle. The old man smiled. "Then let it be our last dance." He rose slowly, carried the lantern into the shallows, and set it adrift on the darkening tide. It floated away, glowing brighter with each passing moment. Far out at sea, the horizon darkened in a long line, like a gathering storm. But no wind came, no waves rose. Only the steady glow of the lantern, drifting toward the open ocean. Then, faintly, just for a moment, a figure appeared standing atop the waves. Tall, broad, wild-haired. Blackbeard lifted a hand in silent acknowledgement as the lantern reached him. The green flame flared once, twice, and then extinguished forever. The ghost turned away, dissolving into mist, as the last echo of his legend faded into the night. Ocracoke grew quiet, but sailors still whisper that on certain moonless nights, a lantern flickers at the horizon, and a shadow stands beside it, guarding the inlet he ruled in life and in death. Blackbeard's last stand was never a defeat. It was a vow.